Welcome everybody back to another episode of Director's Cut. Enjoyed a couple weeks off, but now we are back. We have done everything from Steven Spielberg to Ryan Coogler, and now we're jumping into a little bit lighter in tone, and that is Kevin Smith, Silent Bob himself. We will be going over all of Kevin Smith's filmography, and it's not a huge extensive list, but these are kind of the greatest hits of memory lane. So I am very much looking forward to that. And I can't do this alone as usual. I don't have my usual co-host with me. So Jay and Tony are out on assignment, so to speak. But we do have one returning guest from last episode when we did Jim Henson. And that is my sister, Rebecca Morgan, professional special effects makeup artist. Thank you for coming back on and talking about Silent Bob.
Oh, thank you for having me again.
Yeah, absolutely. And very, very happy to have, this is one of my favorite personal YouTube channels out there, and that's Bad Movie Night. And I'm so happy to have one of the troupe on, and that's Ian from Bad Movie Night. Thank you so much for joining us finally.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right. Well, Becky, you're kind of in charge of our timeline. And before we do that, because this is Director's Cut, we are going to be talking about the films, but also we're going to be talking about the person. So, Kevin Smith, a New Jersey native, the guy's ridiculously young, or a lot younger than I thought he was, only 47 years old and still making films and still making fantastic films. He's also does, Fat Man on Batman podcast with Mark Bernardin. Great stuff. We'll go to Ian. What's your kind of background with Kevin Smith?
I discovered him in the late 90s. I'd gotten a job as a clerk at a store, and not long after I'd been at a Blockbuster and saw Clerks right there on the shelf. I'm like, hey, like I am. And I had to pick it up and check it out. And sure enough, as soon as I saw that, I had to track down everything else he'd done, and have been a loyal follower ever since. Listen to both Fat Man on Batman as well as a couple of his other podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely. And Becky, we talked about this off air a little bit. He is, not only are you familiar with his movies, but he's actually even inspired you right now in something else going on, right?
Oh, well, I mean, his health and weight loss journey is pretty inspiring. But I mean, mostly we just grew up with him. I mean, yeah, that's pretty much it. We just grew up with Kevin Smith. It was one of those staples, especially being your sister. It was kind of like a total staple between you and I know that for sure. So
yeah. And I mean, and what you're referring to with the weight loss and everything, he did, I think, he had like a major heart attack or something, right? So it was kind of dodgy there for a minute.
Yeah. And his positivity has been amazing. I follow him on Instagram and social media, and he's just I just think he's a very accessible, unaffected person, and that's, I think, the big draw for me as him as a personality. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And people that are kind of doing this, and like you said off air again, Becky, it's just like, I feel like we're like 2 or 3 people removed from actually kind of knowing this person. It's like you're in, movie makeup and all that stuff. So I'm sure a lot of people that know him. Ian, you probably kind of the same thing, and I'm the same way. Yep. It's like if you do this thing, he like Becky said, he is kind of on the more accessible side. He does, Mark Bernardin does stuff with like Schmodown and stuff like that, if you guys are familiar with that. But let's kind of Jay from Classic Flicks is jumping into the chat as well, so we'll kind of get into the chat in a little bit. But Becky, what is first on the docket as far as Kevin Smith movies go?
That would be Clerks, 1994.
All right. And as our newcomer on the show, I'm going to give the honor to you, Mr. Ian. What is your kind of background with this film?
Clerks is kind of like a day in the life kind of film of a couple clerks working in a convenience store and a video store, respectively. I worked retail from a very young age. Don't anymore, thankfully, but it's very relatable. Stupid questions are a pretty universal thing across any retail endeavor.
It really was. Like, that's Clerks is probably up there as one of the most quotable Kevin Smith films. Definitely not PC quotable, but I mean,
no.
If you work in any kind of, like you said, retail or anything, I think everyone, at least the three of us, and probably anyone that would be watching this, has stated, I'm not even supposed to be here today.
For sure.
Yeah. For sure.
Hopefully not so much when he's. I forget. Do you guys remember the name of his girlfriend in that? The one that had a overabundance of fellatio problems.
Oh man, that actress just died about a year ago too. I can't think of her name. Yeah,
I didn't know that.
I can't think of that character name off the top of my head all of a sudden. It's been a little while since I've seen it.
It's like Karen or something, right? I don't know.
It's close. Doesn't feel quite right.
Caitlin,
that's right.
Yeah, Jay from the chat helped us out. That's another line that you'll never forget is try not to suck any dick on the way out to the car.
Does that include me?
But I mean that was the first movie that gave us Jay and Silent Bob. But yeah, I mean it really was Dante and Randall because they were just I my very first job, Ian, also was mine was Blockbuster, and that's nice. What kind of gets you into film, right? If you work, it's like if you worked at a movie theater, you work at Blockbuster, you probably wind up doing something like this with your life.
Yeah, it's funny to see now too. The guy who played Snowball, who liked having his own cum spit back in his mouth, is now the director of the new animated Grinch movie.
Well, it's just full circle. I mean,
the fine line between spitting cum and children's animation.
Yep, pretty much.
Right. Well, look at that. The upcoming Happy Time murders, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, yeah, we talked about that.
We
I don't think they're going that direction with this Grinch movie, though.
Well, let's see how the Happy Time Murders does in the box office.
Jim Carrey's Grinch costume was just that close to being porn in the last Grinch rendition.
Yeah, Jay said he worked at Blockbuster for years. It's a pattern here. And the decision to kind of film this in black and white as well. And this is kind of jumping the gun going to Clerks 2, but I was a little bit bummed out that Clerks 2 wasn't all in black and white. I think the beginning segment is, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, when they're showing up to the quick stop and it's burned into the ground, it is in black and white at that point.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
I think it made sense for the story they were telling to do it that way, though.
Right.
The movies wouldn't feel the same if it wasn't purple and yellow and bright colored and feeling like a corporate chain kind of a situation.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and definitely a donkey show is better in color than in black and white, apparently.
Yeah.
All right. Any big moments? Here's a big moment to me that this movie, you said, 1994, that's still affecting me nowadays is, I have a job in a store, and I was going in the back and I saw one of my coworkers kind of checking the eggs. And of course, I walk up to this young gentleman. I think he's like 22 years old. And I'm like, oh, are you going to start smashing the eggs against the glass? And he's just like, he just blank looked at me, this naughty. I think he's even younger than a millennial at this point. And he's just like giving me this weird look. And I'm just like, like Clerks. And he had no idea. So it sucks that these kind of movies haven't really kind of traveled over into this generation of film goers and all that, because this is fantastic.
I think there's a good chunk of younger viewers who have checked it out at this point. But yeah, certainly not all of them. It isn't. Not to the degree it affected our generation.
This up-and-coming generation, though, is kind of disconnected from pop culture the way we knew it. And it's sad because we had things like Clerks and Mallrats where we were like quoting things and it was like woven into our daily lives almost. And I feel like they're missing out.
I think they also have access to so much more than we did too, though.
Sure.
Can't even keep up at this point.
Right. But the sad part about that is that things like that get like this that we're talking about get buried.
Yeah, I think it's also it's already become so dated too, though, because how many 20-year-old kids have been in a video store at this point?
Right.
That's fair. That's very.
And how many of the problems that they had in that movie could have been solved if they just had a damn cell phone?
Right.
That's a great point.
I can't tell you how many times I've joked at work, because we got several guys who have or do play hockey, that we should go out on the roof and play instead of working today.
That's awesome. All right. Any other biggest memorable moments from Clerks, Becky, before we move on to the next movie?
I think Clerks for me was just, it was a way that I could say, like, again, it was something that you and I think the first time I saw it was with you. And I think it was one of those, like, it's funny because Clerks is set up to be such a dude movie, it has all the dude humor, but it's smart, and so I think that there are parts of it that can appeal to either, I know it's like sort of dumb humor, but there is an intellectual element to it that is appealing to even women, I think, which is, I'm not saying that women are smarter than men. I'm just saying that, dude humor is a little different. And I think Clerks was smart enough to appeal to the wider audience. So for me, that's where Clerks is for me in my head.
Ian, is this kind of in the upper echelon of Kevin Smith movies for you?
It's one that hasn't aged overly well for me. I don't sit through this one very often. I've actually been meaning to track down the animated series, not to get ahead on a little bit, and sit through that a couple more times because I really enjoyed that. I had it on DVD. I can't find it anywhere though.
Yeah. All right, Beck, what's next up on the docket?
Mallrats.
1995
Mallrats.
Oh, man, so this was my whole teenage years. This was man, the acting did not sync up with the dialogue in this one. This one was the dialogue was so, and like you said with Clerks, where it is a lot smarter than kind of surface level of what's going on, especially with Mallrats. This is just a couple of kids kind of walking around a mall, wasting their lives, but everyone has this kind of English major degree of dialogue going on, which is completely, like, it's kind of a tonal mess, but kind of funny also, and that's kind of the joke, so to speak. I think his name is Jeremy London or something, is just awful. just absolutely awful in this film, but it works so well in the film as well. And this was the first introduction to one of my favorite actors of the 90s, and that's Jason Lee. Former pro skater Jason Lee turned Kevin View Askew universe-ite. And this movie was just so fantastic. I think this is the first time we got to see Ben Affleck and all that. Becky, what were your fondest memories of Mallrats?
I have a lot, and it's funny now because I look back on it, and I think I watched it not too recently, but now, looking at Michael Rooker's his body of work now and how amazing he is there. But I will say, I had this fantasy, because I'm a big Guardians of the Galaxy fan, that someone would stink palm Yondu. I had this total fantasy that this would happen. It's like nerd fantasy that someone would stink palm Yondu somewhere in one of the Guardians. I don't care if it's Star-Lord or Rocket or whoever, but it would have been funny. But
now that we've got references to Kevin Smith films and Star Wars, why not Guardians, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Or at least the towel drop scene would have been something. see Michael Rooker's 60-year-old blue ass would have been fantastic.
Well, we almost got to, but anyway, going back to watching that, there's so many quotable moments. There's so many like just, again, it's that dude humor, but it's still appealing. Like, he has this amazing way of making the characters somewhat poignant as well. And that's kind of fun. Like the lead in Mallrats is a little bit poignant. And he's trying to get the girl, and he's trying to please her father, and it's this whole thing. But along the way, there's all these terrible, like, super, like, raunchy humor, which is, I have to admit, it's hilarious. So,
yeah. Absolutely. And what was I going to say? It's just the line, just as much as Clerks, if not more, the lines in Mallrats really stick out to me. Please God, when do I see the goddamn sailboat? Or
it's not a sailboat, it's a schooner.
Right. Or you said it was a good size. God, and Shannon Doherty, she was one of the best parts about this, acting wise. She was one of the best actors, and this is before she kind of went batshit crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, is this one, Ian, that you watch, that you rewatch ever?
Yeah, definitely. This is certainly the movie that cemented Kevin Smith's place in nerd culture forever. Going back to what you said, Becky, I think Kevin Smith movies have always been very kind to its female characters, and the movies have held up better, I think, as a result of that, because you don't have this weird like masochistic thing that a lot of dude comedies of that era did. You know, some of these guys are like, oh, I can't get a girl. They end up coming across so slimy now in a way that I don't think Jeremy London's character does in that movie, because it's respectful at the very least, even if not all the female characters are, you know, perfect model citizens necessarily. Right. But neither are the guys, so you wouldn't expect it to be that way.
Right. Well, all the characters are beautifully flawed, but that's a great point. Yeah. That all the female characters are written well and respectfully.
They're real characters.
Right.
They're not just objects for the male character's affections.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that is coming because, and this is just what I've observed. I don't know Kevin Smith personally, but from what I gather, he's a very nice guy. Mm-hmm. And I think the way that he depicts his relationship with his daughter and his wife in real life sort of transcends in his writing. So he has that common respect for women, and that makes these movies watchable. I mean, even for the most staunch feminist, I think it's still a watchable film. Yeah. And it is real in the fact that, you know, he kind of writes the men as kind of oafish but sweet, and that's kind of like, you know, I think it's fair in both.
Except for maybe Ben Affleck's character.
Yeah, I mean,
I have a whole other thing with Ben Affleck. I can't.
Yeah, but I mean, he is because you're not a fan, Becky, of Ben Affleck.
I'm not a Ben Affleck fan. No, I'm not.
And this is the quintessential douchebag role, and he does it so well in this. And Jay in the chat says, you know, best line, tell him Steve Day, fuck you, fanboy. But his character is so stupid. He works at the Fashionable Mail, and then you know, the back of a Volkswagen. That's another great line. Yeah. Hey, but you're right with the women in this. Even the girl that's like doing this weird sexual case study that kind of is the MacGuffin at the end. And Claire Forlani's character, she's, you know, just not the kind of damsel in distress. She's written very smart, and she's not the best. You know, the acting from her isn't the best, but it's Brody in this one, right? Because it's Brody. Brody in this one. He is a little bit more of the masochist kind of oafish one that's very aloof, and you know, he's doing just the beginning scenes with that conversation is funny with Jason Smith. But this is definitely one of my favorite of the filmography for Kevin Smith. But yeah, any more before we move on? We got a lot on the docket, so
I want to go back real quick to something you said right at the beginning. I didn't dislike Jeremy London's performance as bad as you did. Maybe it's because I saw it at such a young age. It's just ingrained in, you know, my memory at this point. I think the dialogue he had to deliver is really tough in this movie. I think he overcame it to the best that you could expect to. Kevin Smith dialogue can be a little tough at times, for sure.
Yeah, but then, I mean, just conversely, just someone like Jason Lee that just kind of broke on, because I think Jeremy London had some other TV roles at this point.
Yeah,
in his career, and it just looked like, you know, and those two were in so many scenes together, and it just looked like he was just so much faster and cleaner with his deliveries, with these jokes, and Jeremy London was like overacting with his body and doing all these, you know, big gestures and stuff like that, which, you know, I don't want to kill him for it, and like I said, he was this kind of doughy-eyed kind of dope in this movie, this kind of romantic in a role of this kind of like dick and fart joke kind of movie. So yeah, you know, I don't want to kill him too much because it totally worked. The style totally worked for it. But then, yeah, you know, and then we got the character Jay and Silent Bob again, and it seemed like they were amping up the role more and more as the films went. Did you guys like, and we'll get more into Jay and Silent Bob, the characters, but did you like that through line through all this of those two characters?
Yeah. It's definitely a better Batman movie than we've had in the last 10 years. So.
Right. Sorry, I'm talking to the chat. Okay. Anything else from Mallrats before we move on?
No.
All right, Beck, what's next?
We have 1997 Chasing Amy.
All right. Why don't you kick us off with Chasing Amy?
This is actually one I think because it has more of a chick flick vibe, I think, obviously. But again, I think that it is and it's interesting subject matter for the time. I mean, 1997, where obviously the 90s were we were getting a little more liberal, obviously liberal minded, and the media was a little more accepting. We had, we had someone like Bill Clinton in office who was liberal. But I mean, we're coming around as a society, I think, accepting different lifestyles. And I think this is a really cool little story regarding that struggle. Everyone, I can personally sort of relate to that struggle myself, because in high school I had a similar situation, but reversed. And so I don't know.
I remember that.
Yeah. So I have a personal connection with this story. No, you wouldn't. I guess you wouldn't. But yeah, I have I don't know. I think that again, he was kind in writing her, and I think she's kind of a hot mess, obviously, in the film. But
who isn't in a Kevin Smith film, right?
Well, right. That's why they work so well, because everybody is a hot mess anyway. So in real life, so to see these characters relatable on screen. But I really liked Chasing Amy. I still think it holds up really well, and I think it's a great commentary on what was happening at the time and that sort of struggle where people were coming out and being more open about who they were, and it's just a cute love story. Everybody gets their heart broken. It depends on which way you get your heart broken. But this was a little twist on that particular tale, and I thought it was really great and well written. Even though I don't like Ben Affleck, but this
movie is and I'll quickly piggyback on that, because as much as a douchebag as Ben Affleck is in Mallrats, he's your main character, he's your protagonist in Chasing Amy, so to speak. And he's kind of a big D-bag in this film. He comes off as this kind of ignorant, but in a bad way kind of thing, and he's kind of learning, he's stumbling through the process that he's being taught by the character of Amy through this entire thing, where she's just basically just like, okay, it almost comes off as kind of a little like stalkery or like he's harassing her a little bit throughout, because yes, she is kind of opening up as a friend and then opening up a little bit more, but it's almost like he's pushing her to have these feelings for him throughout. At least that's how I felt. But I love, I think Jason Lee kind of steals the show in this one as well. Ian, what were your thoughts on Chasing Amy?
Yeah, I'm a little less inclined to agree that this one holds up as well. I tried watching it about a year or two ago, I suppose. I especially wonder what somebody seeing it for the first time would think of this movie, because I think it could come across as a little like leaving the message that, all a lesbian needs is some good D and she'll turn around. I wonder if it come off that way. So I think, having talked to some folks, who are part of the LGBT community, though, this is a very important movie for its time, and certainly, moved the discussion along. So it certainly, with the appropriate historical context, can be forgiven a few sins, I suppose. Because I know a coworker of mine had, never seen somebody like him in a movie like that before, and it was really important to him. So I wonder if it would hold up for somebody younger or somebody who just hadn't seen it before now, because now we have so many more great examples of LGBT folks in
for sure
culture, and in there's a whole evolution. Group of cinema for them. Yeah.
I mean, yes, there's a huge evolution. We've come a long way since Chasing Amy, obviously,
for sure.
And but I think that the underlying message, I think, that I caught in glimpses in that film was, it's not about him. It's not all about him. And he had to learn that this is not all about you. Yes, you have these feelings. Yes, and I think that Kevin Smith was able to sort of capture that message or relay that message to the audience in an effective way. And no, I mean, the ending is not ideal, obviously, but I think that but this movie screams 90s.
Yeah.
I mean, I can look at it and just like the music culture and the everything, it screams 90s. That's it. And I, again, I was a young person in the 90s, because I'm obviously not young now, I'm not going to age myself too much here, but I can look at that, and I think, I guess, coming from and being at an age where I've been sort of online the whole time, it transcends for me well.
Right on.
Yes. Yeah. But I understand what you mean by, we have a more evolved frame of mind now, I think, regarding LGBTQ and all that stuff.
But it did start a conversation back then, which is important. And like you guys both stated, it was in a lot different time now. This was before internet and this was before all that stuff. So it did spark some of those conversations, which was good for the community, even though it was kind of like a bull in a vagina shop.
There's just no representation back then, or it was hard to find if it was out there. So to see folks like that on at least a relatively mainstream movie was a big deal.
Yeah, and this is one, and I do agree. At the time when this was new, and even a little bit later, I thought that this was kind of one of my favorite of his catalog. But you're right, it doesn't really hold up. It's just from a filmmaking standpoint, it's not shot the best, and it's unfortunately kind of one of the most forgettable ones. And I used to love this film growing up, but it is kind of in the back burner. It's like, oh yeah, and then there's Chasing Amy, because I think Mallrats was so strong, and then I think the follow-up to Chasing Amy was kind of so loud and stuff that that this one kind of gets lost in the back burner, or gets put in the back burner.
Which is funny, because I think in its time, it was completely the opposite. Mallrats was a big bust. It was a financial failure. It was a critical failure. It was a butt of a lot of Kevin Smith's jokes even at the time. And Chasing Amy was very well received in its time. It's interesting to see how, that legacy has continued for both those films.
Yeah, that's a great point.
That's why it's funny, because if you talk to me about Kevin Smith, Chasing Amy stands out in my mind probably before Mallrats does even.
Okay.
So I think it's because it was more of a box office hit at the time. And again, I'm old, so I remember when it came out. So I obviously it was more of a pop culture hit at that time than Mallrats was. So I remember Chasing Amy probably more prominently than Mallrats.
Right on. I do distinctly remember. I don't remember the exact dialogue, but I remember that Silent Bob monologue at the end of that movie in the diner was particularly, it's like one of the best Silent Bob moments in any Kevin Smith film, or Scream film for that matter.
That's right. And we should, we kind of like a little trivia thing. I don't remember his, if he even had a line or any lines in Clerks, but obviously in Mallrats, it's adventure, excitement, Jedi's crave not these things. Did he have anything in Clerks?
In Clerks, he did the lasagna monologue.
Oh yeah. I don't even begin to remember anything he actually said, but yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's something like I've had a lot of girlfriends in my day, but none of them bring me lasagna, man. You got a good thing, you better appreciate it, you dumb idiot.
Nice. Yeah. I love the one Chasing Amy too. All right, and let's segue into the next film. What is after Chasing Amy?
That'd be Dogma, 1999.
Oh boy, Ian, you want to take this one?
Sure. It's probably around when Dogma came out on VHS that I was first discovering Kevin Smith, picking up Clerks first, and then going back and finding Dogma and Mallrats and Chasing Amy. This is one that definitely caused a bit of a hubbub. It's definitely what got him on the wrong side of certain religious groups. An Alan Rickman classic, of course. A George Carlin classic. It's probably my single favorite Kevin Smith film. And it's also the hardest one to track down, especially if you're looking to try and catch it just on a Netflix or Hulu or something. It doesn't seem to pop up nearly as much as things like Clerks and Mallrats and things. So it's definitely the one I've probably seen the least.
Did they do a Blu-ray transfer of this?
I'm sure. I don't know. I've never gone out of my way to pay for it, to be perfectly honest. But I think I used to have it on VHS back in the day, but I don't anymore.
Yeah. Becky, I know you loved Dogma back then too. We used to watch this movie constantly.
Yeah, I do love Dogma, and again, Alan Rickman. When you said Alan Rickman, my whole heart just yes, it was amazing, and Salma Hayek, and I think one of the biggest impressive things about this film too is the cast.
Yeah.
He was able to cast these huge names at the time. I mean, it was
when he was his hottest.
Selma Hayek, it was huge back then, and I mean, she's huge now, but this is when she was really burgeoning. And
Chris Rock,
yeah, and
Ben Affleck,
Matt Damon.
Damn it. Matt Damon is slightly less douchey, but Ben Affleck. Anyway, yeah, I just love the movie. I love the subject matter, and I think it's right on. And I know it was controversial at the time. It still is for some people. Maybe that's why it's hard to find. I don't know. But yeah, I think it was really a brave move. I think it was a really brave move on his part at that point.
This movie had the second.
So much.
Oh, sorry.
Like, that's okay. He done like so much fluff, almost like fluff, I guess I want to say. And then to tackle the subject matter was really brave, I think.
Yeah.
This was the second best cameo in a movie of all time. The first one, I would have to say Bill Murray in Zombieland, but Alanis Morissette as God in this was absolutely fantastic.
That's pretty great. I understand he originally wanted to get her to play the main female character, but then I guess production got moved and she couldn't do it because she was on tour. Or no, I think for whatever reason she wasn't available, but she came back later and said, "Hey, I'm still available to do something if you want." And that's where they put her in. I think that was perfect. One of those happy accidents.
They found, or they settled on Linda Fornelli or something. She was the one that was in Men in Black, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this was the first film that Kevin Smith really tried to do gore, which he would kind of do more of later on, in the kind of newer films. Where I thought in this movie he did absolutely fantastic. The boardroom scene in this, where was it Loki and Barnaby?
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah. And he just goes absolutely crazy, and it's just like buckets of blood, and just the them cutting off their wings looks fantastic. Like you said, Alan Rickman with he's built like a Barbie doll.
Megatron.
I can make you, or she can make you better. Yeah, I mean. This had some great stuff. It felt like, and this is again just kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but this felt like what Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back was trying to do. This nailed it because it had this great ensemble cast of these fantastic actors. And it felt like they try to go back to the well, or Kevin Smith tried to go back to the well a little bit and replicate that kind of magic, and just, kind of repackage it and say it was, but these are, the View Askew characters and people are going to like that a little bit better. But I think this was pulled off better. It was just probably one of his most competently filmed movies as well. It felt like
cinematographer.
It really did. It felt like a big grand movie, and but it was just kind of this satirical romp. And like you said, George Carlin this is one of my favorite on-screen George Carlin roles ever. All right. Anyone else about Dogma?
Also had a great Carrie Fisher scene in there. Or no, that was Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Never mind.
They kind of blended together, and that's not necessarily a great thing, because like I said, I think he kind of tried to rip off himself and make this movie again, but with just his own original characters. At least in my opinion, once we really get into Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. Is that really the next movie too?
Yes, it is.
I think so.
Yep.
Yeah. Yikes.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly why they kind of meshed together. And I'm not saying Jay and Silent Bob wasn't a ton of fun, because it was. It is a fun movie, but it's one of those
that set out to make a very different movie.
Yeah.
More of a parody than it was a serious dramatic thing.
Oh yeah, well I think it was also like it was like almost for the fans. It was like a giant inside joke.
Yeah.
I mean, since this afternoon, I just have to state this. Since my brother asked me to do this tonight, I've been singing the Sweaty Ball song all day. And it's still in my head, and I have to be careful, because if my 8-year-old hears me singing the Sweaty Ball song, we're going to have a problem. It's going to be an issue.
As long as he doesn't start telling you about how he's the clip master, then I think
then we're really going to have a problem, yeah.
Well, like you guys said, this was when he was kind of at the top of his game with these movies. And I felt like, again, it feels like I'm really harping on this movie. And I guess I am a little bit, but it just kind of felt like a cash in on the popularity of these two through line characters. Like, the lifeblood of the View Askew universe is Jay and Silent Bob. So putting them as the prominent members, to me, it just felt like they're better as a kind of a support role, where they are featured quite prominently. Yeah, in Dogma, they're featured quite prominently. They are main characters, but they were part of a more ongoing cast. And it was fun to see, Brody again and all these other characters like Ben Affleck's character and everybody from Chasing Amy. But I don't know, it just wasn't my favorite thing. I do, however, love, Mark Hamill's cock knocker. That was a bright spot for me.
I think this was my first theatrical experience for a Kevin Smith film, and I think I remember being a little bit disappointed in it at the time, because it definitely doesn't have the heart that Mallrats, Chasing Amy, Dogma all had. But it's one that's definitely improved in my estimation over time. It's a very rewatchable film.
Yeah.
It's something I'll absolutely put on in the background while I'm doing other things and just kind of enjoy it. But this was also intended to be the send-off for Jay and Silent Bob. It was kind of supposed to be their last appearance. So that was also, I think, why they put them front and center in this one.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Obviously didn't work out that way, but...
No. But I feel like that's kind of when his movie started kind of slowing down a little bit, because I don't remember exactly at the time, but it felt like after this there was kind of like a breath, and everyone's like, oh, okay, that was the culmination of this little multiverse, and now we're kind of on to other things. So what does that segue into, Becky?
That segues into Jersey Girl.
I will take a nap, and you guys go ahead.
I feel the same. Actually, I did not see Jersey Girl. I feel like this is where Kevin Smith jumped the shark a bit for me. I can't.
Oh, we have dissension in the group.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I think it's a highly underrated film.
But you know what? Here's to be fair, I didn't give it a chance. So I could. Well, I could go back and watch
right?
It. Well, and J-Lo. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Why would I watch that? I can't. There's nothing appealing for me. There was no appeal for me.
Yeah.
So, and then J-Lo, I'm like, ugh. So,
the timing of that movie was definitely very unfortunate, because that was right when culture was turning on the whole Bennifer situation, and I think this movie suffered as a result of that. I don't remember loving it the first time I saw it either. This is a movie that I just rewatched again, probably within the last couple of years, and I remember really enjoying it a whole lot more now than I did back then. It definitely has a very Kevin Smith tone to it. But it feels much more like a romantic comedy than anything else he'd done before. It definitely felt like a play towards a larger audience than a lot.
It was a lot
of
cleaner.
Did. But I'm a father now. I have a little girl, so I think I just found it maybe more relatable now than I did when I was a 20-year-old. Believe it or not.
It's definitely one that I want to rewatch. But I remember watching it. I think I watched it at least 2 or 3 times back then. And it was kind of just a take it or leave it kind of thing. Cause we just came off of Dogma and, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. And there was just such a ramp up. And then he kind of makes it, like you said, just kind of a quiet, more, subdued romantic comedy. And, I'm not the biggest Liv Tyler fan, and Ben Affleck was kind of oversaturating the market. So he was coming off as a little bit obnoxious at the time. So that's maybe why, I didn't get into it as much back then, but you've convinced me to want to rewatch it now. So
I'd strongly recommend a rewatch. It's a better movie than people remember it being.
I'll watch it for the first time.
Really?
I will.
There's a lot of heart to that movie, and George Carlin's role as the grandfather to the little girl in that movie is really sweet and really funny.
Yeah, that is one thing that I do remember that I did enjoy.
You finally get the crossover of the two Smiths that we'd all been wanting up to that point. You've got Kevin Smith and Will Smith together at last.
Did we really?
And it was the first time in a movie that Ben Affleck was referred to as Batman.
Oh, so we can blame that then.
Prophesizing the future.
Yeah, who knew?
Thanks a lot, Kevin Smith.
I think at that point too, he was
ruining Batman. No.
He was really pushing for Spider-Man too at that time. So I think, you know, he did. That's, you know, he just came off. No, Kevin Smith, because he was really trying to, because he was beat out by Sam Raimi, but I know it was like neck and neck to
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he almost got there, but so he was working on that, and you know, he just came off of Jay and Silent Bob, so that's maybe, you know, and he wanted to stay kind of in the limelight because he was a pretty prophetic director back then, where it was just like movie all the time, because he was very hot. So I think he was really putting his eggs in the basket for Spider-Man, and then
that would have been after Superman Lives fell apart, wouldn't it have been?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, okay. Yeah. So I mean, that's maybe it was a couple of you know, hits to the chin of the old ego back then, of kind of losing out to those two opportunities. So I don't know. What's after Jersey Girl?
After Jersey Girl, we've got Clerks 2.
The Return of Jay and Silent Bob. Ian, you want to take this one away?
Universe. Yeah. Clerks 2 is definitely my favorite. Like you, I was very skeptical going into it. I thought, oh, what? We're going back to this? They should just leave it alone. Clerks is fine. We don't need a sequel. Oh my God, they're doing it in color. They're going to ruin it. And I just remember enjoying the hell out of that movie.
Yeah.
It's for sure the Kevin Smith movie that I've rewatched the most times. Even my wife, just before we started, was saying that, you know, she's probably seen this movie about 100,000 times. Especially in college, I had a roommate who also really liked it. We just always had that on the TV while we were working on things in the garage or screwing around. I could probably recite every line in this movie.
The line that sticks out to me for some reason is pillow pants.
Yes.
That's my favorite line of that movie. I don't, and unfortunately, for some reason, it's one of the ones that I haven't watched a lot or rewatched a lot of.
Yeah.
I remember Rosario Dawson was great in it, and I just remember pillow pants, and that was kind of enough for me. And that's kind of when Jason Mewes is really going through some tough times with having addiction problems, and you could definitely tell he lost kind of the pep in his step, the artificial pep in his step, you know, probably. And he, you know, it almost was kind of like a solemn movie, because just knowing what he was going through in real life and seeing him kind of reprise the role at like a half speed, like a half measure, was almost depressing to me. But yeah, I did enjoy Clerks 2 quite a bit, and it did kind of surpass my expectations, because like you, I was like, oh no, like we're going back there because, you know, is this a shock to what happened with Jersey Girl? Because I mean, if you recall, like how much crap he got for Jersey Girl, people were just done with him.
Specifically, all the bad press and everyone talking about how bad Jersey Girl was. I remember that prominently. And it was sort of sad, you know, because I was a Kevin Smith fan, so.
I remember liking this one right out of the gate, though, and it has never gone down in my estimation. I really, really, really love this film.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, God created Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith created Clerks 2. Therefore, Clerks 2 is a gift from God.
Or a gift from Alanis Morissette. All right, what's after Clerks 2?
So after Clerks 2, we have Zach and Miri make a porno, which I haven't seen either. I feel like out of the loop on that one, but I wanted to see it. It's on my film bucket list.
I'm gonna take the lead on this one, and I'm going to, maybe it's an unpopular opinion, but this is one of my favorite Kevin Smith films. I think this one's hilarious. This was a time where the other kind of comedy troupe broke onto the scene, and that's the Judd Apatow group. And this was when they were doing those kind of, this felt like a collab movie, like a collaboration between studios, because at the time, you know, Judd Apatow was on fire with 40-Year-Old Virgin and you know, his connections to Anchorman and stuff like that. And so they did the kind of, what's that? Superbad, yeah. And they did that kind of collaboration with Adam Sandler, you know, the Happy Madison group in Funny People, and then they did this in Zach and Miri Make a Porno with Seth Rogen. But then you also had, you know, I forget his name, but the guy that plays Randall and everyone. And I thought this movie was absolutely fantastic. I had like no expectations for this to be good at all, and I laughed my ass off on it. It has surprising amounts of heart. But yeah, my favorite part of this movie, of course, is, do you believe this shit? Well, do you believe this shit? Which, I don't want to spoil it for Becky, but that is a very memorable scene. Ian, what did you think about Zack and Miri?
Somehow this one had flown under my radar at the time. I didn't even know this was a Kevin Smith film when it hit theaters. So it was one that I hadn't gone to. It was only later, years later, that I realized, oh, really? That was a Kevin Smith movie? I better check that out. I just thought it was another, Apatow, family. Not, family flick, but, in the family of the Apatow flick. So, yeah, I agree. This one is a heck of a lot of fun. It's completely underrated. I don't know why more people don't talk about this one. Is it his best? No, but I really enjoy it. It has a lot of rewatchability to it.
And Jason Mewes was fantastic in this. This was one of the first roles that we get to see him not be Jay, and I thought his his temperament kind of lended a little bit to what was going on too, because he is kind of a burnout in this film, and he is just the Dutch rudder scene, all this stuff that I want to talk about, but I don't want to ruin it for Becky.
The silliness of the role was like perfect for him too.
Yeah, and it had
he's
Tracy.
Certainly not the best actor in the world, but it worked just right for who he was at that time.
Oh yeah, it was perfect. Seth Rogen was great. Elizabeth Banks was fantastic in this film.
Yeah, the only thing wrong with this film is that it is completely unbelievable that somebody like Elizabeth Banks would want to be with a guy like Seth Rogen.
Especially fat Seth Rogen at the time. I mean, this was not his best body shape.
Poor Seth Rogen.
But I'm gonna get used to that dynamic in film. It's always some schlubby guy getting with a much more attractive girl.
And then they followed it up with what the one with him and Katherine Heigl, the more traditional
40-Year-Old Virgin.
No, it wasn't 40 years.
No.
Oh God, why can't I think of the name of that damn movie? Yeah, Katherine Heigl, and it had all the Judd Apatow group in it.
Was it the one where she's pregnant?
Yes.
Yeah. She gets pregnant, and they were like a one-night stand.
Yeah,
I saw that, and I can't remember that either. It's Seth Rogen, and it's Katherine Heigl.
Come on, chat, help me out, or help us out here.
Somebody look it up.
Damn it! What was? Oh well. Anyways, this is riveting for people. Just three people like, whoa, what was the thing? The funny thing is, you mentioned Superman, but not Eli Roth. He was not in this film. Brandon Roth, rather, was in this film, playing Justin Long, who later on would star in the movie Tusk. Those were two great roles as well. This had such and he cast his own wife as like the kind of the woman that ran the high school reunion, and she's like not wearing a bra during the entire thing. This it just had so much awesome things. Just the fact that the whole premise of the movie is them trying to a bunch of people that essentially work at a Starbucks are trying to make a guerrilla Star Wars porn is just fantastic. They did it so well. But yeah, let's move on. What's after Zack and Miri? 2010,
we've got Cop Out.
I didn't see it.
Either.
Yeah, this is the only Kevin Smith film that I've never seen. I've always felt the need to go back and check it out, to be a completionist, and I've never actually sat down to do it.
From what I was
this was just saying, this was another one that I didn't realize was a Kevin Smith film when it was out in theaters, and it wasn't until years later that I heard him talking about it on a podcast, and I went, "Oh, that was a Kevin Smith film, really? Maybe I should check it out." And then I just never did.
Yeah, Bruce Willis and Tracy Morgan don't scream, Kevin Smith.
No, and he certainly had long-running grievances with Bruce Willis for how he acted on the set of that movie.
Oh, I didn't know about that. What happened?
Yeah, he's talked about it in a bunch of scenes. He was just difficult and masochistic, and just a difficult person. And Kevin Smith does not deal well with confrontation. Yeah. He's not about to put a difficult actor in his place.
Yeah,
he surprised me about Bruce Willis, though.
No,
like, he seems kind of
no. Yeah, and it was a weird place in his career too.
Oh yeah, well, right now everything right now for Bruce Willis is a weird place in Bruce Willis's career.
Yeah, but he was already huge. But then the types of movies that Bruce Willis made weren't being made at that time because they'd been priced out of the market. Kind of those like mid-budget action films based on original scripts just weren't happening in the mid-2000s anymore.
Right.
Yeah, I mean he's one bad decision away or one bad comment away from being the next Mel Gibson, Nicolas Cage. So
right, yeah, I agree.
I haven't heard anything specific, but yeah.
The only movie that was worth watching for me with Bruce Willis in it was Pulp Fiction.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some. There's
I liked
some.
What was the M. Night Shyamalan movie he did?
Oh, Unbreakable.
Unbreakable, I liked quite a bit.
That's my least favorite M. Night Shyamalan. That's for another show.
Okay.
I would imagine.
That's your least favorite? Oh yeah.
Unbreakable is my least favorite M. Night Shyamalan movie.
That fucking comment just wrote, or that show just wrote itself. I mean, we got to come back on for that.
Since I'm coming to you from southeastern Pennsylvania, thoroughly offended.
What? No.
But I can't do it.
I drive past scenes in that movie constantly.
Oh,
in some of those movies anyway.
That's probably cool. I mean, we're originally from Los Angeles, so we get that
in
a lot of films as well. So I can relate to that. I can totally relate to that.
In particular, there's a scene where they're driving in The Visit that just upsets me so much because the geography doesn't work at all.
Oh no.
But we're getting off track.
No, and that's our review of Cop Out.
My review of Cop Out is I hate Unbreakable.
Yeah, that's how riveting Cop Out was. We talk about M. Night Shyamalan movies. All right,
maybe we have to punish ourselves by all going and watching Cop Out and then coming back and doing a review of it together.
Oh God, please no! I'll watch The Happening 10 times before I have to fucking watch Cop Out once.
Okay, we're doing a reunion Kevin Smith director's cut. That's what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
After everyone's actually watched all the movies.
Yeah. All right. What's next?
Okay, Red State, 2011.
Yes.
All right.
Michael Parks' best movie.
You just reacted quite strongly, so you go ahead and take it, Ian.
Yeah, Red State is such a departure for Kevin Smith. It's the first movie that definitely doesn't feel like a Kevin Smith film. Michael Parks was amazing in that movie. Just mwah. All the acting was good. I think it was the first instance of a Ralph Garman appearance in a Kevin Smith film, too.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see a lot more of him going forward in the filmography and, of course, the podcasts. A lot of good things to say about this movie. I can't really... Nothing really wrong with it, to be honest.
I'm going to be honest, I just watched Red State for the very first time last night in preparation for this show. So I am fresh with Red State, and I mean 3 words: Michael fucking Parks.
I know, right?
Fantastic. But okay. So I'm not going to say it's a perfect movie, and I might even jab it a little bit more than you did. But I think that this movie, and I completely applaud Kevin Smith for this because it was very ambitious, but it did feel like a couple different movies sandwiched into one. It felt a little, because he has his own style, and it felt a little bit like a tonal mess because you have Michael Parks doing that sermon. And does it go on for maybe a minute or two too long? Sure. But it's riveting. And you almost start like buying into this shit. He's just so much fun to listen to. This crazy, did you see this movie at all, Becky?
No, I did not.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna have to talk about it because it's just
do it.
Just seeing him just fucking go crazy in this film and he's so serious, and that's the thing. He's playing it so straight, but that's kind of the joke. Even though kind of the last lineup is just like shut the fuck up because like everyone else is so like Michael Parks' character is an alien as in this film. But then you get those kind of back and forth between John Goodman and Kevin Pollak, and that feels like more of a Kevin Smith film. They're like sitting there kind of cracking jokes on the cusp of this very violent showdown. And that's what I mean by it just kind of feels tonally all over the place. I liked all the performances, but they just didn't sync up. And I think the wife, and I'm blanking on her name at this moment, I felt like she was a little bit too much. I felt like she was a little bit unbelievable to an extent because
I liked it.
yeah. Well, to an extent, because I when my father was alive, I'd go to Texas like once a year, and they are in a very, very small town in Texas. Mm-hmm. And that is kind of what was going on as far as, the temperament goes and just the kind of outward zealotry, which is kind of scary. It was like watching, a movie set in Tom Bean, Texas. But it was great. It was very surprising, and very bold. The ending kind of was a mess. The ending kind of fell flat for me with the whole trumpet thing. And but again, Michael Parks, he made me believe, because he believed so much that all this stuff was happening. But I'm glad that they did kind of wrap it up in kind of a straight way, where it didn't turn into that. Because I'm like, oh my God, are they going to somehow tie this into like Dogma or something? Like, what is happening to the ending of this film? But yeah, I mean, just for Michael Parks alone, go watch this film.
Tell me that if you were in Michael Parks' congregation, that you wouldn't go as zealous as that woman
did. Seriously, he just ate up every bit of that, every scene.
That's one of my favorite performances in all of cinema.
Yeah,
that Michael Parks performance. I can appreciate this feels a little bit like a tonal mess, I think, and it's a little bit harder to follow than your average film because there's no distinct protagonist. Like even the boys who are trying to, like, clearly the church is the villain in this movie, and this weird preacher who's supposed to be a takeoff on what's the church that's always protesting funerals?
It's 9 points. Is it 9
that's what
points?
It's called in the movie. That's what's called in the movie. What's it called? Westboro Baptist Church.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So you've got the three boys that they've kidnapped and ostensibly intend to kill for their sins. Typically you think, oh well, they must be the sympathetic character. No, they're slime balls.
Everyone's an asshole.
In the way that men in Kevin Smith films usually aren't, outside of Ben Affleck's character in Mallrats. They're disgusting slime balls, and there's really no character you're rooting for in this movie ultimately, and then even when you lose those characters, you're right, you're not even following one character's story from beginning to end in this film. I really liked it though. I liked the creative nature of it. This is the film that destroyed Kevin Smith's career for many years going forward, but
which I don't see that at all. I mean, I can't believe that happened, because I thought that if anything, even though it wasn't a perfect film and it was kind of a mess, I felt like it should have been applauded, because he did take this kind of almost like a Tarantino-esque, left turn, and Tarantino loved this film, and then this was also a kind of return to do more of that gore, which I thought he pulled off pretty well. So, I thought that it was crazy. It was very, yeah, go ahead.
It wasn't because it was a bad film. It had to do with conflicts with either, I don't know if it was the financiers or the distribution company, and a whole falling out there. And he ended up, I think, buying out the rights, and he took it on tour and like traveled around the country doing, and that's when he said, I'm quitting directing. I'm not directing anything anymore. I hate the Hollywood studio system, and yada yada yada. And it was just a big blow up, and I guess it worked out mostly successfully for him in the long run, but this one never really had the distribution that any of his last few films had.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought I love Stephen Root in this. Goodman's acting was spotty at times in this one, which was kind of surprising. Really? I
really liked his performance in this one.
Yeah, maybe it was just because Michael Parks was just such. But I thought the three kids did a great job. I thought they were really big standouts. I thought the girl, the daughter, I thought she was very believable.
She was probably the most sympathetic character.
Yeah, and she knew. She's like, yeah, we're terrible people. Like, let's go this route. But yeah, there was no good guy at all, which did feel very Tarantino-y. It had a kind of like a Hateful Eight vibe to it. But yeah, I thought it was a good film. Not great, but it was a lot of fun. Becky, what's next?
We have Tusk.
I didn't see this film. I know you guys did. So what did you guys think of Tusk?
I watched it, and it was funny because I absolutely, this is the movie that is so bad that I have to love it. It's
another Michael Parks movie
with my horror movie love and passion, and just from that, I'm a big fan of like classic horror films, and I, me, I like gore and I like that stuff, and it's kind of part of my career. In a sense, and this movie was so bad that I just loved it. I can't. It's just I could watch it over and over again. It's the kind of film experience that at the end you're like, what the fuck just happened? Like, what did I just? Did that guy just turn into that's a walrus? Like, he's a and it's just so amazing and ridiculous and absurd and amazing, like beautiful. I love it. I can't say
so if you like Michael Park's performance in this one at all, you've got to check out Red State, because it is like another level beyond.
I will definitely watch. Apparently I have a Kevin Smith marathon coming up
right on.
In the near future.
Except not Cop Out. Just watch a Shyamalan film.
But Tusk is great because, like, it has sort of the human centipede feel to it. So it's that weird, disturbing, captive sort of vibe, which always sort of disturbing, almost like a hostile. He does capture the creepy very well, but just it's so absurd, and you're like, this is horrifying, but it's also hilarious at the same time. So there's so many emotions when I watch Tusk, and the makeup's not bad. I mean, the practical effects in this movie are not bad. I mean, for what it is, it's a lot. It's just fun. It's a lot of fun. It's a great horror movie night, popcorn sort of, film. But at the end, just kind of like, I can't believe I've just fucking watched the whole thing at the end. But I love it. I love it.
Becky's favorite Kevin Smith film, Tusk.
Right? It could very well be.
So I would say you can draw a direct line to the fact that I'm only on with you guys because of Tusk. So I, having always been a Kevin Smith fan, but I hadn't really gotten into podcasts yet at that point, and I had read an article about what had happened on his podcast, where they had they'd outlined this story just as a joke based on an article they'd read out of the UK, and just kind of him and Scott on Smodcast had come up with this idea for a story, and he just I need to make this into a movie. I know I quit directing, but I'm going to come back because I need to make this movie.
Oh my god!
So actually, I should say I don't love this film, but I kind of love the pure creative endeavor of it. The fact that this movie exists makes the world better.
Yes.
And because I read the article about what happened on the podcast and that this movie was going to be made, I discovered Kevin Smith podcast at a time in my life when I was prone to looking for audio content. So got into Kevin Smith podcast. From there, got into various other podcasts as well. Eventually did podcast with my friend Chris on Bad Movie Night and a YouTube show, which is how met you guys, and here I am. I think it's a little bit too inside jokey of a movie specifically for people who listen to his podcasts. A lot of references to the podcast and things like that, and it kind of makes me cringe to watch. Like, was this his FU to Hollywood, where he's just like, all right, I'm going to make this movie and you guys wanted me out, but now I'm going to make a walrus movie? I think enough time passed between Red State and this that a lot of that attitude in him had cooled off. I wouldn't necessarily say that, but it's like when you have a really good friend, you've got a lot of inside jokes, and then you go to a party where you don't know anybody else, and he keeps making the inside jokes. Is what it feels like. It's like, dude, nobody else here knows the jokes. What are you doing, man? Knock it off. You're embarrassing me in front of the cool kids.
How was Justin Long's performance in this?
It was good, but it was a tough one to pull off. It wasn't, he's playing a role of a podcaster who's doing his own podcast and going up to Canada to do an interview. And I don't think that was a very relatable thing at that time.
Okay, man, how come I didn't see this film?
I actually think Justin Long did okay. I mean, again, this movie is not a cinematic masterpiece. It's not going to win any. It didn't win any Academy Awards or any awards. I think, I don't know. It's really about sort of the camp value, and I think that that's exactly what he set out to do, is make a campy horror film that is sort of and I feel like for real horror fans, this can be sort of a staple.
Yeah, it's definitely a throwback to like 80s creature features too.
Yeah, and again, it has that it has that vibe, but it also has a little bit, like I said, a little bit of the human centipede sort of hostile vibe as well. And enough to where there were moments where I was watching going, this is really effective. Like, he did this well. And that's what's shocking, I think, about the film, is that it is super campy, but there are moments where he actually pulled it off. And I was like, this could be a decent standalone horror film, Yeah. And that was what was surprising to me, because it's like, it's very different for Kevin Smith, but also not. Do you know what I mean?
For sure.
So, I loved it. I think it's great.
Yeah.
A lot of fun.
Awesome. Did you guys do Tusk for Bad Movie Night?
No, we haven't. That kind of fits into a weird time frame where for the podcast we tend to do much older stuff, 80s, 90s. For the YouTube channel, we're doing a lot of current stuff that just came out. So it'd be a fun one to go back and do someday, though.
Nice. All right. Well, I gotta watch.
Definitely the type of movie we'd do for sure.
Yeah. Well, and now I gotta watch Tusk. You gotta watch Red State. And which one did you not watch, Ian?
Cop Out.
Okay, no, yeah, don't watch that. Okay. Is there anything? I think there's one more after Tusk, right?
There's two. Yeah, there's two more technically. One is Yoga Hosers, and then the other one is Holidays, which is various directors, and he was included in that. So
yeah,
I haven't seen either of these films.
Yoga Hosers is definitely a spiritual sequel to Tusk. Has some of the same characters. It has Johnny Depp reprising his role from Tusk. It's definitely a different tone to it. I really liked it the first time I saw it for the same reason I like Tusk. It's just a pure creative energy to it that he set out to make his movie and wasn't going to compromise and made it, and that's awesome. I didn't find it to have a lot of rewatchability, unfortunately.
What is the premise of Yoga Hosers?
Some girls, it's Kevin Smith's daughter and Johnny Depp's daughter, are high school kids that work in a convenience store. And their town gets overrun by these weird little Nazi sausages, and they end up taking them out using yoga moves and hockey sticks. And it's
now I have to.
Oh my god!
It's a really strange film. It's a really strange film. It's even maybe a level above Tusk in strangeness. It's got Ralph Garman, who hosts a podcast with Kevin Smith called Hollywood Babylon, as the Nazi villain who's in charge of all these little tiny creatures. Really bizarre flick. It's definitely one I think I'll probably show my daughter in a couple of years. She's a little young for it at the moment. She's easily scared. Those little Nazi sausages will probably terrify her. But
I mean, just the word Nazi sausage is just fantastic.
Yeah, like Tusk, it's not a very popular film, especially from people who kind of the toxic side of fandom who thinks he should just shut up and not make anything because Clerks and Mallrats were great. Nothing else he's ever done is good. But I didn't love it, but I'm glad it exists.
Yeah, it is. So the last movie that featured Jay and Silent Bob was Clerks 2 then, right?
Or Scream 4? I don't know what order they came out in.
So yeah, it looks like he was just he wasn't lying. He was putting those characters to bed, but it seems like he has kind of moved on from that. And it looks like even though his filmography, his or later films, or more recent films rather, do have a lot of comedic elements to it, it does seem like he does want to take kind of a different tone and kind of reinvent himself. And I think that he should, because though movies like Red State didn't have they weren't perfect. The people that do that genre, like a Quentin Tarantino, definitely are kind of masters at it. It does seem like he is competent at these kind of films, and I do hope that he kind of explores that a little bit more.
I have to make a bit of a correction here. He has not put Jay and Silent Bob to bed. They're going to be making several appearances coming up. I know he just hinted this week that they're making an appearance in a music video, though he's been a little bit mum on who or what exactly. In this September, they start filming Jay and Silent Bob Reboot.
Oh, geez.
The sequel to Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back.
All right. I stand corrected.
He plans to use them in an upcoming film he's been trying to get financed. And I think he is finally moving forward on the financing, called Moose Jaws. It's going to be Jaws, but with a moose.
It's like putting just things in hats, like different animals and then different situations, and just pulling out two things. But the world is going to be better for it. So yeah, that kind of wraps up our look in, our look into Kevin Smith's filmography, his director's cut, his spotlight. Great. I mean, very underrated. You say underrated, but how big Kevin Smith was in the night. Everyone knew what Jay and Silent Bob was. That was a complete brand back then, and I'm looking forward to seeing if he can reprise this or kind of revive this franchise, because I'm definitely on board for it. So I want to thank you guys for joining us for this director's cut. Becky, where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Rebecca Morgan Creative. So you can get me there. And then I do have a YouTube channel. I'm not super active on YouTube right now, but there are some Disney Bound-esque makeup tutorials on there. Just Rebecca Morgan, RebeccaMorgan.
And you're doing something right now. You're starting that we were talking about earlier, right? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, I just started. I'm having my first summer camp for kids teaching effects makeup. So it's a summer camp, a day camp, basically for kids who are passionate teens, 12 and up, who are passionate about learning special effects makeup. So we'll be teaching that out of a place here in Vegas called the Bubblegum Gallery. They were gracious enough to allow me to use their space, and I'll be doing that on June 21st. Will be my first class. So
excellent.
Go to the Bubblegum Gallery Facebook, and you can actually buy tickets through that.
Perfect. Awesome. And man, Ian from Bad Movie Night, I'm so so happy to have one of you guys on here, and super excited. I mean, seriously, I've been watching you guys religiously now for a while, for a little bit now. Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just so much fun seeing you and Chris banter back and forth, and all the little skits. Great watch. So please go subscribe to Bad Movie Night. And where can everyone find you, Ian?
Yeah, check out Bad Movie Night on YouTube. We also have a podcast. You can subscribe to that there. For the YouTube channel, we're currently in the middle of Dino Month. I've heard there's some kind of big budget dinosaur flick coming out later this month, but we're reaping the benefit of all the knockoffs, the Jurassic games, the Triassic worlds, those types of things. So we've got one video out on one of those. We got more coming in the next week or two.
Awesome. Fantastic stuff, sir. You can find me right here on this very YouTube channel. They said, we said. You could also find me, Jon Dunning, on Twitter at OrzovDunn. You could also find me on Facebook and Instagram at Jon Dunning. Yeah, thank you guys again. That was our director's cut of Kevin Smith. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.